No, it's going to... Good evening and welcome to episode 10 of The Layover. Tonight, Scott raids a barn, Mark scores a touchdown, and I'm going to be talking U2s, beach landings, and bunking off school. Welcome to The Layover Live.
One life for the revolution. Rise up and unite. Woo! Rise up.
Scott.
Oh,
Again,
that was
I've
a
got
horrible noise.
Do you know what?
Sorry,
So
I
that
got
was
caught out again.
that was the first time of me pushing the buttons to start. And had you not been choking back your bottle, I feel like that would have been seamless.
Oh, that was like a
Seamless,
really
maybe not.
noise.
Scott, where are you?
I'm in Washington. I'm in my hotel room, and the internet is rubbish. Thank you, Marriott, for your rubbish internet. Yeah, I'll give Marriott a plug for having no internet in their hotel rooms. But it's really snowy here. It's a winter wonderland outside, and I'm really enjoying it. Looking forward to the show, though. What's happening, Lynn?
It's exciting.
Well, I'm going to come on that in just a minute, but we're going to have a quick roundup of what's been going on this week. So,
Ooh.
Scott, there was a tweet you put on which was all about a barn find.
Oh, yeah, this was bonkers, actually. I don't know if
Yeah,
anyone
let me
saw
bring
this.
this up. So
This was
tell us
the-
about this.
What are we
Yeah,
looking
so
at there?
it was-
What is that?
It looks a bit odd, doesn't it? If you think, what the bloody hell is that? But that's the V-Force in somebody's back garden. So that's on the left, a Valiant, a Vulcan in the middle, and a Victor to the right. So these are original aircraft cockpits that someone has bought when they were scrapping the aircraft. He's put them in his shed, and he's actually been rebuilding these, putting them back to original state. So these are 3 cockpits which have all the original parts in, and they're going to sell them. So Hanson's Auctions have got these up, and they're looking for about £300,000 the guide price. If you've got a few shekels left from Christmas, Mark, we can get ourselves some. Yeah,
Wow.
we can
That
get
seems-
ourselves.
Yeah, that seems like a lot of money to me.
I heard it was 3 for 2.
Maybe you can pick the Victor and the Vulcan and leave the Valiant behind. No, I think,
Wow.
to be fair though, I think it's the 50th anniversary of the V-Force coming up this year. And I know the RAF Benevolent Fund got a secret project which they're working on around the V-Force. So this is actually probably the best time to sell it, because the V-Force is actually going to get quite a bit of exposure this year, because it's the first flight, so the 50th anniversary of the V-Force. So be pretty cool, but I certainly wouldn't pay 300 grand, and Sharon would kill me if I
Can you
wanted to put
imagine?
those in the garden. Could you imagine?
Can you imagine?
Didn't you have a really good barn find story with Mustangs?
Oh, there was. I meant to try and find the picture, but there's a guy in the States that bought a bunch of Mustangs, I think in the 50s, and just rolled them into a hangar, and there they stayed. And they were absolutely original. About 40 Merlins behind. I can't remember the name. I'll try and find the post another time, because it was. I love a barn find. I love anything.
Yeah,
like that.
well, to go into that just very quickly, and I know this is slightly off topic, but I don't know if you know Mike Edwards, who's a pilot where we work. He did something very similar with the Indian Air Force and went on a find, and he went and found a lot of vintage Indian aircraft in a hangar in India somewhere, and that was the start of the Indian Air Force's vintage heritage flight. So Mike Edwards, he's written a few books about it. Spitfire Sing was one of the books, and he found these in a hangar in India whilst he was on a trip. Amazing. Sorry, I've digressed a little.
He'd be interesting to talk to. He'd be a superb guest. Right, what else we got?
There was another really good tweet Scott made about a drone versus helicopter. Now, we all know how much you love helicopters, Scott.
And drones. So
Yeah,
helicopters and Scott, don't mix. Nor the drones and helicopters by the looks of things.
Helicopters, ships, anything at sea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Submarines. Scott's
No,
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 within those.
Not a
So what we
freaking
got here?
So this is the spinning discs of death attached to a Bell helicopter. And what happened was, this is a military helicopter. It was doing a military mission, a maritime mission, it says, in Chile. And actually it flew into a drone, a DJI Mavic drone. And the drone actually went straight through, as you can see the hole in the perspex there. It went straight through, hit the observer actually in the chest. Very luckily, the observer was wearing a helmet with his visor down, and only sustained minor injuries. He did go to hospital, but he only sustained minor injuries. It just goes to show that actually that drones are, we can all, if you're flying a drone sensibly, you could get out the way of a helicopter. There is nothing that would stop that drone getting out of the way of the helicopter. It's just about having situational awareness and keeping a good lookout for bigger aircraft, because they're not going to see that drone. They're not going to see that small drone, particularly if they're mission focused on, I think it was a maritime search. So they could be mission focused and actually just not see the drone. They were very lucky, in my view, to get away with that.
Silly question. Was the drone meant to be there? Was it part of
it wasn't anything to do with the search and rescue. No, it was a private drone.
Unfortunate. I guess, for most of us are a little bit higher up, and we're lucky we've got slightly thicker windscreens, but nevertheless they're a bit of a hazard. We'd all like to share the sky happily, really. What else?
Next week, Super Bowl.
Oh, Super Bowl. Super Bowl.
Not only is
we're trying to decide which one. Was it 55?
55.
It really challenged my Roman numerals. So
XXX, 1XX.
God.
So we love the Americans. They love a good fly past, don't they? At any sporting event. And I think this one is going to be one to beat.
Look at that.
So they're going to have the B1, the B2, and the B52 for the fly past.
So I just had a little one of my moments there. I love the B1, the bone. I love it. I love its history, and I love the fact that it ended up getting slower in its career, and that it got sort of resurrected by Ronnie Reagan. I love the B2 because it's cool, and I love the B52 because it's also cool. I know these things are also like planet-ending weapons of death and destruction, but as aeroplanes, they are absolutely fantastic. We all know which one will retire last, of course, don't we?
Yeah. So a couple of two. Yeah. So the B52 is almost as old as me, as I'm sure you know, almost. So it's been around a really long time, hasn't it? But for me, I'm with you, Mark. The B1.
Oh, sorry, Scott.
No offense.
Yeah, I wasn't boring you that much, was I?
You love the B1.
I love the B1. I think I used to. So in previous job in the Air Force, I used to brush my teeth as I was going to bed in the middle of the desert, going to bed in the tent, just as the B1s would take off every night from Thumb Rate, going off to Afghanistan. And this was like something from Battlestar Galactica taking off. It was just utterly awesome. The noise, you can actually feel the noise.
It is, of course, full of XB-70 technology. So my other sort of big favorite airplane, but yeah, it's absolutely full of XB-70 tech. But yeah, great looking airplane. Great.
Lindsay, I noticed you've brought that one up. Swinging. But what I'd like to ask you to do is bring the other comment up from John, if you don't mind, just for a second.
About the one where we were late on, or the one about the drone?
Yeah. No, the one about where we were late on. And that was a button pressing issue. So, Lindsay, it was absolutely seamless though, but we didn't press the button until too late. No, that's fine. Carry on. So, yeah.
Noted. On a serious note, so what else have we got? Scotty, what have we got?
Oh, yeah, talking of Scott's Air Force career, the Hercules.
Oh, yeah. Very sad yesterday, the anniversary of this crash. 47 Squadron, which I served on for most of my Air Force career. One of the aircraft from the SF fight, which was part of that squadron, was shot down in Iraq in 2005. I'm sure you remember. A very sad day for the squadron. We lost 10 people on that. It was exceptionally sad, and it changed the tactics, and actually we ended up getting explosive suppressant foam in the tanks, which they believe was partly caused the accident after the enemy action against that. But a really sad day, and I had to mark it yesterday by a poignant thread to the guys, friends that we lost on that day. A really sad day, but if we're in aviation long enough, particularly military aviation, sadly, you will know someone who has lost a life. It's a risky business.
Really tough. Really tough.
Okay.
What else have we got? Should we lift the mood again?
Should we go on to our guest?
Yeah. Let's go.
Let's turn our attention to the future.
Okay, so tonight on the Layover Show, we're going to be talking to 18-year-old Ellie Carter, a private pilot who's been flying solo since her 14th birthday.
That's brilliant.
She was the UK's youngest pilot at the age of 16, and she's become a role model for teens and young people who aspire to fly. Ellie's now a regular on the general aviation scene, sharing her cub adventures with us all on social media. So we're going to talk to her tonight about how she got into flying, how she manages to juggle aviation and Avgas. And we're going to hear about some of her most memorable experiences to date. Now, despite being young in years, Ellie's got over 120 hours in her logbook, and she's been involved in aviation from a really young age. She's flown 31 different types of aircraft, which is an impressive feat. And actually, I don't think many of us would achieve that in our whole sort of aviation career. So we're going to find out her top 5 aircraft. We're going to revisit her engine failure after takeoff. We're going to listen as she takes us through her own D-Day channel crossing. And we're going to hear how aviation features post A-level. So Ellie, let me welcome you to the show. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. 31 types.
That's a lot of aeroplanes. Scott hasn't even got 31 landings.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? I think I could probably stretch it to 10 maybe in my career. I've probably done 10 types. And Mark's probably done more than me, and I'm sure Lindsay has as well, but 31 is ridiculous.
It is quite a few, actually.
So Ellie, give us a quick insight into how you kind of made your pathway into aviation, because everybody's got their own story and it's unique to them. So tell us about yours.
Yeah, so I had a pretty unique way to get into aviation. I was fascinated with the U2 at about the age of 8, and I decided to write a letter to the U2 pilots to ask if I could see their aircraft. This letter went to the Pentagon and almost got my parents arrested. Unfortunately, it didn't, and I'm still have to put up with them. But I was allowed to see the U2 up at Fairford, and they actually got me my first flight with a test pilot over here in a Cicata rally, and it kind of all snowballed from there, which is really cool.
No, it's funny you should mention that, because Scott managed to dive deep into the YouTube archives, and we've actually got the video of the news. I think, was it Forces TV? So I'm going to just play this. So if you just 1 minute, and we'll have a little look at, how old were you in this?
9.
9, okay.
Belle's dream to become a pilot got a major boost today. Ellie Carter raced 120 miles per hour in a chase car following a U-2 spy plane as it came into land. She was also shown around the aircraft. Ellie wrote to the organisers of the world's largest military air show, asking if they could feature her favourite plane. Inspired by Ellie's letter, the crew organised the visit to RAF Fairford.
I met the pilots today, and then I got to help land the plane. It was really fun, and then I got to go in and look in the cockpit of the plane.
I would say her knowledge is comparable to just about any of us out here. She's done quite a lot of homework.
She's always dreamt about and watched YouTube videos and about chase cars going around the back of aeroplanes, going down the runway and meeting the pilots, and it's her dream. Her dream's to be a U2 pilot.
Oh,
That's cute.
so that was kind of like, was that kind of your first big moment where you thought, actually this is something that I want to do?
Not the first moment. To be honest, I always wanted to be a pilot. I'd sit in a pushchair when I was about 2 and look up at vapor trails. And then at school, I was kind of in a low flying area with the RAF, which was really, really cool. So we'd have the red arrows flying over the playground. And so I'd always be running to the gate to kind of look at that. So I think it was kind of always in my blood. I just always wanted to do it.
What was it about the U2, apart from possibly the vague notion you might get rid of your parents through get them exfiltrated to some place in Cuba?
Well, I'm a bit of a geek. I love maths and physics, and I think the science of an aircraft flying on the edge of space is absolutely fascinating and really, really interesting. So that was probably the start of it.
It's a really good link as well, into the fact that actually if you go to our YouTube channel, the Layover on YouTube, we have a YouTube video from an inside cockpit video that we got from the USAF of someone flying a U2 on the edge of space. So if you want to see that, it's on our YouTube channel.
Cool. And I mean, sort of interesting subject to go and write to the Pentagon to say, can I have a look at one of your most secret airplanes, please? And they let you have a really good look around it by the looks of things.
They did. I had a whole day. We were supposed to have like 2 hours or something, and I ended up talking about everything airplanes, like I normally end up doing. And I spent the whole day with them when we got dinner and everything, and they're really, really good, and we're still friends with them to the day. So yeah, it's really interesting.
That was so sweet.
And apart from the US military, who else do you think has inspired you sort of along your journey? Has there been anybody in particular who you thought, wow, I really want to be like them, or that's something really, really cool? Is there anybody else kind of along the way that you look to?
There are so many inspirations in aviation. There are kind of too many to list, but a few would be obviously the U2 guys. There's a Belgian F-16 pilot, or there was, called Mitch Bullen. And I remember being at an air show with him, having a conversation, and he was one of the first people that told me that I could be a pilot. So he was really, really inspiring. And also some of the greats. Betty Coleman's really cool, Catherine Stinson, and Pancho Barnes is really, really cool. She did like all this barnstorming and stuff, and I love stunts and all that kind of stuff. So she's definitely inspiring.
Yeah,
I'm just sad we didn't make the list. Any of us there, Lindsay. You must be gutted you didn't make Ellie's list. What a shame.
No, it's a tough list.
Yeah, I mean
it's an amazing list. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any sort of aviation in your family?
None at all. My parents couldn't care less, to be honest, and they knew nothing about it. But yeah,
which is brilliant because I'm from a sort of bit of a flying family. You've grown up around airplanes and the Air Force and so on, but it's nice to hear people who just come in from a completely different direction. That's brilliant.
So Ellie, when you sort of a little bit after the U2 experience, when did you think to yourself, right, I'm going to get into gliding? Because you went solo at 14?
Yeah, so I met some other pilots since then, and I was kind of flying passenger and learning to fly with some other people unofficially. And while I was up at an airfield, I met a glider pilot, and they said, why don't you give it a go? And it was kind of a fill-in because I couldn't actually officially learn to fly, being only 12. So I kind of went up and started gliding, and that led to my solo.
Sorry, go on.
So when you were signed off for your solo flight, you sat in your glider, and I'm guessing the instructor said, right, that's it, you're good to go, you're on your own this time. So tell us how that felt. What was rushing through your head? Were you thinking this is what I've been working to, or I'm super nervous, or how did you feel?
I can't really remember, to be honest, but I think I'd done so much flying by that point that it was kind of another launch, and I'd done so much training that I kind of knew what to do. So it was just think about what I'm going to do and do it eventually. Yeah,
that moment when the rope's going out. That was my first solo in glider was at 43 years old or 44 years old or something like that. And of course, I was absolutely cacking it because I absolutely knew how bad I was and how much I had to kind of learn, and I'd done it all very quickly as well. But yeah, it's amazing what you say about kind of very stepped way that you work through it, and then but having the maturity to do it at 14 is fantastic. And for anyone who's watching out there, whether you're 13 or 14, or whether you're one of the parents of a 13 or 14-year-old, your kid can do this too. That's the message, isn't it? You can get out there and do it, and it's an amazing and very affordable way of getting airborne.
And Ellie, was this a school day or was this a weekend?
It was a school day. It was actually a really, really interesting story. We spoke to the head teacher at the time and said, "Can we have the day off school?" And he went, yeah, sure, it's fine. You don't need to fill any forms in or anything. And then about 2 days before, he asked me to fill a form out, and we were like, "Well, you said we don't have to." And he said, "Oh no, I want to frame it on my wall. It makes a change from tonsillitis." So they were absolutely great. It was
Brilliant.
That's brilliant. So Ellie, how did you get from gliding to being in your cub with your PPL? I mean, do you see that as a natural progression, or how did you get from one to the other?
I think it was a natural progression for me because I always wanted to do my PPL, and gliding was kind of just that bit in between to kind of take up time. So it wasn't unnatural as such. I kind of just went to dunk as well and started at about 15.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I mean, did you? I mean, what were you hoping to use it for? I mean, we'll talk later perhaps about your aspirations beyond your A-levels, but did you want to use your PPL for anything in particular, or did you have a goal at that point or not?
I'd already decided that I wanted to do some sort of flying career, so I think it was kind of a step towards there and a step where I could kind of build some hours up and get a load of flying experience.
All right. I know Mark's going to talk to you a little bit about the Cub later, but was the Cub the aeroplane you started your PPL on, or did you start on a 152 or something like that and progress to the tail wheel? How did that come about?
So the Cub I was flying before I even started my PPL. I was very lucky that a pilot took me for a flight in it, and we kind of got along well, and it went from there. But I did my PPL at Dunkeswell in a 152, and then did my tail dragger in the Satabria up there as well.
Brilliant.
So Ellie, when you did your PPL, what year would you have been in at school?
Because I really wanted to get my license on my 17th birthday, I did it at the same age as the GCSEs.
Wow. So how did you balance that? Did you do the PPL on weekends, or did you have like an intensive, think, right, the Easter holidays are coming up, so I've got 2 weeks, I can really blitz a whole bunch of hours in this time?
So I'd fly pretty much every single weekend, every single day. I kind of take books up to the airfield and revise up there, and then come home and revise a bit more and do some more ground school. And I just work some really, really long hours to fit in.
I mean, that must have been it must have been a really tough balance. I mean, what was the hardest part of that course when you were trying to balance that school work with, your PPL work as well? I mean, some of it will mix. So if you're doing physics, some of it might mix with the PPL course work. But what bit did you find really hard, Ellie, if there was a bit?
The flying bit wasn't too bad because I'd flown so much before, but definitely balancing it and finding enough time in the day to do it all.
All right. Yeah, that's interesting, and it's interesting because you've just said there, the flying bit, that wasn't too bad because I'd done a whole bunch of flying. I think people don't realise how much stick time you get in a glider, everything from the rollout down to 3 or 4 knots to the launch and everything. So, and that intensity of flying is incredibly useful when you go on into your PPL or later on in your career. It's fantastic.
Yeah. I just want to ask Ellie, so to go back to this, and somebody, Ansi, has asked the question, he'd be pretty scared if his girl wanted to go up into the sky just on 13. Very brave of your parents to allow you to do that. Looking back now that you're you've moved on from that point in your life, if you were to meet somebody today who's the same age as you when you started out on this journey, what advice would you give them and their parents? That'd be a really, really good one.
Definitely do it. It's such an amazing thing. It's difficult and you've got to work hard, but definitely do it. There's so many people out there that really, really want to support people that at that age, myself included. So definitely do it. Parents-wise, I don't think I'm really qualified to speak on that part, but my parents are really that helped.
But what did you say to your parents to kind of did they ever show any kind of worry? I mean, maybe if they didn't, maybe that's a problem as well. But
no, not really. I think I kind of came home from school one day and I was like, I really want to fly planes, and they probably thought it was a bit weird at first, but they were really, really supportive. They allowed me to fly, and my dad even wrote me 2 books to encourage me about young girls in aviation in 1912. So they kind of went above and beyond to support me.
He wrote you 2 books, or read 2 books?
He wrote me 2 books.
Hang on.
Wow.
Can we explain?
So my dad's also very, very clever, and he wrote me 2 books about 3 girls, all from different backgrounds in 1912. So one Irish girl who wasn't very rich, one rich girl, to be very stereotypical, and one black girl, and they all followed different paths into aviation and encountered different challenges along the way. And that was supposed to inspire me, and it was really, really good, and it definitely did its trick.
So, Ellie, can I just ask you, is it a piece of fiction that your dad wrote just to give you sort of 3 parts, or was this something that he actually researched and found these people?
No, so it is fiction, but a lot of the stuff in it was heavily researched, so it's actually really accurate as well, which is really, really nice.
Wow.
Hence the best. Yeah, okay. And have they been published?
They haven't, no. I wish they would be, because they're so good, but no, they haven't.
I think maybe we need to kind of get the Layover publishing house up and running, don't you, Scott?
Yeah. I think we do. We know a man. We know a man who can make this happen.
That's pretty right. Okay, sorry. Carry on with the interview.
Okay, so
that was brilliant.
You've just done your skills test, final handling test for PPL, and you land after the flight. And how did the examiner? How did they give you the good news?
He kind of just very casually said, "Well, you passed. That's cool," and that was that. So it was pretty chill.
Wow.
I guess there's other people learning to fly when you're learning to fly. Were many of them like you, if you know what I mean? You know, what was the sort of other folks that you mixed with? What were they like?
There weren't too many young girls as such learning to fly. There were a lot of men and some younger men actually. But it's actually really nice to see now that there are a lot more young girls coming through aviation, and even just at Dunk as well. There's loads now. It's really, really nice. I'd like to think that I have some part in that, but yeah.
Yeah, brilliant.
So Ellie, you've got 31. You had a little tally up, didn't you? You've got 31 different types of aircraft that you've flown, which I think is probably more than Scott and I combined. Like you've got a little bit more than that, but
yeah, I've flown.
But Scott and I definitely haven't got that between us. So, what would be your top 5 out of all the aircraft types you've flown? If you had to choose 5, what would they be?
I always say that's really difficult because every aircraft handles so differently. But the Cicata Rally has to be on the list. It was the first aircraft I ever flew in, and I was lucky enough to do some aerobatics and wing overs and whiffadills in it, and with my mum in the back, which was amazing because she was screaming her head off. So being a 9-year-old girl, I love that. That has to be on the list. But also the Cub, it's kind of my trusted companion. I spend pretty much every good day in summer with the Cub. It's so versatile. You can land in short fields. You can go to Belgium in it. So it's really, really lovely. The Chipmunk, I think it's kind of got to be one on a lot of people's lists.
Yeah.
It's a lovely aircraft. And I was lucky enough to do some aerobatics with John Beatty in it. So that's a really, really lovely aircraft.
John Beatty, right, we'll come on to John Beatty in a minute. As in, John is about 107, used to fly for the Royal Navy, John Beatty.
Yep, John Beatty.
Okay, I'll tell you a few stories. Actually, yeah, I think I can tell you some stories about John Beatty.
Please do. Another one would be...
Was that number for the chipmunk?
Yeah.
Three. Or
Three.
Three.
I don't know.
4.
The Super Decathlon, I'm about to start doing aerobatics on that one. It's also the aircraft I had an engine failure in, which is
we're
quite
going to come on to that. We're going to come on to that in a little while.
which is quite memorable. So that's on the list. And the last one will be a King Air because it's the only multi-engine I've ever done. Someone was lucky enough, very nice, and I was lucky enough to go in a flight with them. And so that's got to be on the list.
Yeah, nice.
And out of all of those aircraft types, which one do you think you're the most comfortable in, and why?
Well, I'm not the tallest, so comfortable in anything is not really an option. Flying the Cub with hill brakes is like a game of Twister. It's not the best.
At least you can get in and out.
Yeah, just about. But flying wise, I'm comfortable in pretty much all of them. I think one good thing the Cub teaches you is how to fly by feel and the basics of flying. So going from different aircraft isn't too difficult. You kind of just keep to the checklist and just kind of position yourself in that different aircraft, and it's not too difficult. So I'm comfortable in most things.
That was a question I was going to ask actually, Ellie. Is how difficult is it to switch between all these different types and keep it in your head? I mean, it's not like riding a bicycle, is it? It's very, as you say, they all handle differently. Do you find that easy, or you see you stick to the checklist, but is it when you're coming over the hedge? Do you have to consciously think to yourself, "Oh, I'm in the Cub today, or I'm in a decathlon today, and it's going to be different," or do you just kind of fly the plane?
Learning to fly by feel was very, very useful for me because it's kind of feeling that point where you're going to touch down or where you're going to flare is very useful. But when I first get in an aircraft, I always look at the kind of visual and make sure that I'm happy with how it's going to land, what's the kind of visual going to look like when I'm going to touch down and stuff. But yeah, they all have their individual quirks, and you've kind of got to mentally prepare yourself before you get in any aircraft to remind yourself what the quirks are, what could happen, what's likely to happen. And I think it's as much a mental game as it is just being able to fly an aircraft.
Yeah, really interesting. There's some good airplanes in that list. Super Decathlon was the one that really surprised me. I was surprised how nice that was. And so if anyone out there is looking for an airplane to fly that's almost a pit special but half the price to run, Decathlon is the way to go. The Rally as well. So I used to fly the Koliber, which is the Polish-built version, and they are super cool. They're really cool. I mean, they're incredibly hilarious airplanes, and I used to love flying that into short strips and things.
So, Ellie, most people, I think, tend to do their PPL on either like a 152 or a PA28 or something. So, for people who have got their license and have maybe done their training in that aircraft, if you could choose one aircraft to recommend to them to say this would be the next one I think you should try, what would you choose?
As for one aircraft, that's very difficult. But I definitely just say any form of tail dragger. Really, they really improve your flying. It's a very good skill, and if you can fly a tail dragger, it will improve your nose wall landings and just your flying in general. So definitely tail draggers. So
Ellie, when I was 17, I got my PPL as well, and I remember that. So I had a part-time job working in Sainsbury's, and it used to be really, really difficult to finance flying, and I had to think, I've got this much money this month, and I want to do all these different things. So how do you think you go about making sort of every hour count? What's the best way to sort of get the most for your money?
Well, firstly, I kind of sacrifice the things that a lot of teenagers probably wouldn't. I don't do the new clothes and all designers and that kind of stuff. So that saves a little bit. But really, it's just working really, really, really hard, doing any job you could possibly get your hands on. I've homeschooled kids because I'm fairly clever. I've done some film work and just pretty much anything to earn any money possible. But I was also very lucky that at Dunk as well, they were very good about making sure I had the right amount for this and that and this. So when it comes to my people, I had the right amount of hours and the right amount of experience for everything.
Yeah. And I found as well it was quite important to sort of plan ahead. So if you thought, well, I want to achieve, this land away, I've only got, this amount of hours. So you kind of, a bit of efficient planning, I tend to find sort of went a long way as well. But it is tough.
Yeah, making every act a real challenge. It's very easy for people once they've got their PPL to think, okay, I don't know what to do now. I'm fed up with flying 152. What now?
I'll do some circuits or something.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. The tail dragger thing is brilliant advice, and there's some amazing airplanes available nowadays. Cool.
So Mark's going to talk to you about Cubs. This is a hot favourite of Mark's.
I like Cubs. We like Cubs. Okay, so Cubs are easy to like, aren't they? Let's face it. There'll be lots of people on here who probably know about Cubs, and there are loads of other people that absolutely won't know anything about them. So tell us about the Cub in general, your one, and why do you love it?
Sure. So the Cub that I fly is a 1943 World War II one. It flew in D-Day, which is really cool. So it's a liaison plane. And I fly it from a small farm strip called Westacott. It's 550 feet. You take off one way, land the other way. There's no matter what the wind is, even if it's a tailwind. But the coolest thing is that the circuit is absolutely amazing. It's not a traditional circuit pattern. You kind of go over a valley, and before you kind of duck into it, you've got to make sure there's no lorries by the road, because past that point there's no go around. So you then kind of hop over the road and up onto this hilly 550-foot strip, which is really, really fun. It's just such a fun aircraft. You can do really short landings on it.
Brilliant. Wow. When you first flew the Cub, what did you think? Did you think, I'm not sure I like this straight away, or did it take any time to fall in love with it, or were you instantly smitten? And what was it about it that caused you to think like that?
I loved it from the start. I'm not sure what it is, but it flies lovely. It's a beautiful aircraft. It lands lovely. It has its own little quirks, which is really, really nice. The way you have to land with a trickle of power and all that kind of stuff. It's just a really lovely aircraft, and even the history behind it is so fascinating. It's lovely.
Yeah,
you can't love it.
And heel brake. Yeah, there we go. Oh, look, here we go. Look, Pilot Husky says apart from the heel brakes.
Apart from the heel brakes.
Nobody likes heel brakes. Tell me how you work your heel brakes.
With great difficulty. It is like playing a game of Twister, being very, very small. But yeah, it's difficult, very difficult. I kind of just boot it, and kind of that's the method.
It's who designed them? Go on, sorry, Scott.
No, I was just going to say, what a bonkers design. Who ever thought that braking with your heels was ever going to be something that we should be doing properly? I was just going to say, you mentioned earlier, actually, Ellie, something that I actually saw you tweet about a long time ago, and it was your Belgian channel crossing. Tell us what that was all about, because I kind of remember but don't.
Yeah, so we flew to Belgium in the Cub for a tailwheel meet, which was really, really fun. The Cub isn't very fast. We had a headwind on a few of the legs, and we were tracking along a motorway, and all these cars were overtaking us, which was lovely. It's probably the only time I've ever questioned my choice of transport being the Cub. I kind of got out the aircraft and couldn't actually move, but it was really, really fun. 6 hours later with a few stops, so yeah, it was lovely.
So you said there was a tailwheel meet. Was it just Cubs, or was it lots of tail draggers and stuff like that?
Lots of tail draggers. There was all sorts of things, from RVs to Cubs to Storks to all sorts.
Oh wow, sounds amazing. Complex, yeah, complex to go across the channel as well in a little airplane. Not something I think I would possibly be thinking about doing.
How did you plan? What considerations did you make?
So there's quite a lot of considerations actually. Obviously, being a pretty small one-engine aircraft, we need to be careful about the height we go over the channel. Also, where the boats are. So if we did have an engine failure, where will we be going? But the radio, everyone speaks in French in France. So having an important lookout was really, really important. They speak to us in English, which is amazing, but we can't understand what anybody else is saying, or at least I can't. We also don't have a transponder. So in France, there are a lot of transponder mandatory zones. And I think a lot of the way through there, we had to be below 1,100 feet. So the planning and the altitude of that. I'm very lucky that in the Cub, we don't normally get above 2,500 anyway. But we still had to keep an eye on that. Also, there's only like 2.5 hour endurance. So we had to keep an eye on the fuel and where the fuel stops are around the channel crossing. There's a lot.
And for those viewers and listeners who are not familiar with the complex fuel system on a Cub, can you explain how you tell how much fuel is in a Cub to those people? Ignore the.
There is essentially a piece of cork with a wire on it that you fill the tank up and it floats. And when you can't see it anymore, you've got no fuel. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
There
we go.
I'm just joking. That's it.
Yeah. That's it.
Where is this?
Yeah.
Is it inside the cockpit or?
It's in front of so it's right through the windscreen outside.
You'd love it, Scott.
And
you'd love it.
And what's the plus and minus on this? Is it half a cork? Is it a cold cork? I mean, how do you tell how much fuel you've got? That's ridiculous.
Well,
it took me a little while. Sorry, go on, Ellie.
At least it won't fail. There's no electrics. There is that plus.
Yeah, but fuel and engines help flying. So I'm all for let's have some more fuel.
Yeah, it took me a while to figure out because the tank is oval. The first bit goes down very quick, then the middle bit goes down very slow, and then the last bit just all of a sudden it's all gone, and it goes very quiet after that. But yeah, there we go. Good.
Do you know, one of the things I find, so even when we operate into places like Paris, all the locals speak in French, and it's actually very difficult to build kind of your situational awareness and to get a picture of what's going on around you. So, you know, like you said, making sure you have a good lookout is kind of the only way that you can get an appreciation of where other aircraft are. And I think for people who go and operate onto the continent, you know, as private pilots, that's one thing that's, you know, a bit of a shock when they get over there.
Definitely. I mean, I don't understand a word of French, so that was a way.
No,
I struggle with English most days, Ellie, so don't worry about that.
Here we go. So, Pilot Husky wants to know whether you've flown a Tiger Moth yet.
I haven't. I would love to. They're a lovely aircraft, but no, unfortunately not.
Okay, good. So that's something. And how about a Super Cub? Have you ever had to go of a Super Cub?
I haven't. No.
Am I right in thinking on the Super Cub, the pilot sits in the front? Is that right?
Perfectly correct. Yeah, absolutely. So, go on. Sorry.
Do you not know that, Scott?
No, genuinely didn't know that. I didn't know that was the difference. I thought the engine was the only difference, and obviously some bits of the systems.
Some have flaps, some have wing tanks, there's every different kind of Cub. And that's before you even get to the modifications, yeah.
Yeah, so a friend of ours has a carbon Cub. A friend of all of ours, very good friend of the show, Laura, has a carbon Cub. And it is awesome. It's the only Cub I've ever seen that has better flight deck than the A350. It's absolutely brilliant, and everything's electric. It's GPS, it's got WAS, it can land on RNAVs. That's my kind of Cub. This cork fuel thing is just not doing it for me, I'm afraid.
I'm not sure Ellie's convinced. I think Ellie likes the basics of it all and the straightforward.
Yeah, there's something about a DI being 20 degrees out that's just a really lovely aircraft to fly. It's amazing.
I was just going to say, sorry, my internet is lagging just a little bit here, so if I interrupt you, it's not deliberate. I'd just like to bring up this from Darren. I don't know if you know Darren. Darren's and his wife are very heavily involved in Flight to Help. And he says, would you be willing in a couple of weeks' time to speak to the AIM High students? if you are, don't need to say now, but we'll get you in contact with Darren and his wife, who was awarded an MBE for her work for Fly to Help in the New Year's honours. So congratulations to her.
Awesome.
So Ellie, let's talk about beach landings, because one of the destinations that we're hoping to do next year is Barra. So Barra's up in Scotland. You can land on the beach there, but you landed down is it in Devon?
Yep, Salton Sands.
Okay, so this is a beach. We've actually got a photo. Let me just bring this in. This is a cool picture. I think I got this. I stole this off your Twitter feed.
Wow.
So can you just give us a rundown of what's going on here?
Yeah, so every year for D-Day commemorations, about 8 or so cubs all land on the beach, which is really, really lovely. It's actually kind of fun to land on the beach. It kind of can be dangerous. And it's the only place you can actually stop and get ice cream and then go again. But yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's not bad. You have to sort of mind the donkeys and the people kind of lazing around on towels and things like that, or there's presumably someone sets the beach up beforehand.
Yeah, so Devon D-Day all go around on the ground and kind of clear everybody off. We still got to watch out for rocks. There are sometimes some pretty big rocks on the sand, and occasionally runners with earplugs in that don't notice, and they'll be running along up the runway. So you've got to keep a good lookout.
So when I did my flying, I did most of my flying at Dundee, and it was on concrete. And the first time I had to land on grass, I thought, oh my, this is something new. And you just kind of think this isn't the norm. So how do you come about learning to land on sand? Is it very different to grass? Is it the same? What considerations do you have to think about?
It's very different. Obviously, if you get a wet patch, you don't really want to go sinking into it. And also just having loose sand on top, it handles very differently. But actually practicing is kind of, you can't. Where really can you land on a beach around here? So it's just really a matter of nailing the speed. There's no flaps on the cub either. So nail the speed and just try and get as smooth a landing as possible, and maybe try not to get bogged.
Presumably there are lots of people watching when you arrive.
Yep.
So you want one nice landing.
Yep. Normally the aim is to have the threshold somewhere as far up the beach as possible so people can't see it, and then we just taxi. But yeah, we do want to do a nice landing. Yeah.
Bit of pressure.
I've been on that beach as well in my C-130 because we use Salton Sands for training, or used to when I was in the Air Force. And it's that end of the beach, as I'm sure you know, is owned by the MOD, and they can clear people off of it. And they used it for the film D-Day. That was where the beach landings were filmed for D-Day, which was pretty cool as well. But it's amazing landing on the beach. I did that with a hack, and it's pretty unusual when you land. Perhaps with a cub, people don't run away because they think, it's only a light airplane. But when they see a C-130 turned in finals for the beach, I can guarantee they do run really quick.
And Scotty, once upon a time, arranged for me to go in a C-130, and I was halfway through a cup of tea and realised we were on finals for a beach as well. It might have been the same one, but it was all very exciting.
It was Salton Sands. It was, yeah.
Yeah, it was very, very exciting. So, warbirds. Any other warbirds in your extensive logbook yet, Ellie?
Not too many, unfortunately. I'd love to fly some more. I'd love to fly some of the Wobble One stuff. They're really, really cool. And I have a kind of fascination with the Lysander. I've always loved the Moonlight missions. So if I could ever fly one of them, I'd love to do that. Or my favorite Wobble 2 aircraft of all time is a Beaufighter. So if anybody ever needs a Beaufighter test pilot, I'm game.
So these are very unusual. These are very unusual. Bristol Mercury engined aeroplanes, pretty unusual stuff. So very strangely, Scotty and I are Lysander fans. Scotty's very Lysander focused. The dog's middle name is Lysander. I love it. So what was it about those two airplanes? I think there's a Beaufighter in build at the moment, Bristol. Isn't there? There is a Beaufighter in build. But what was it about those two airplanes that you thought, Yeah, they're the airplanes for me.
They're just lovely aircraft all the way around. They're beautiful. But definitely the Lysander of the Moonlight missions, to navigate by the stars in an aircraft like that and then go and land on some riverbanks is just incredible. And the Beaufighter is just so versatile, and it's such a lovely aircraft. They're amazing.
Have you been to see the Lysander at Shuttleworth?
I haven't, no. I've been up there, but I didn't see it.
We need to get you up there. SOE colours. Yeah.
Yeah,
really
that's my favourite airplane of all time of that era. In fact, actually, probably of all time, if I'm being honest, and especially in the SOE version with the extended tank, it's just an awesome looking airplane. But I've recently, about a year ago, just before the COVID hit, I saw the Bullfighter in the hangar at Bristol, which they're rebuilding, and they're rebuilding from scratch, and that's amazing as well. So if you ever get a chance to go to Bristol Aero, where the Concorde is, one of the other hangars, they have a Bullfighter, which the volunteers are there building from scratch using original parts, and it's going to be a big ask for them to get it finished, but it does look awesome. They're getting there slowly.
And so, Ellie, kind of what next? What's your plan, your trajectory? I'm really conscious we're right at the beginning of your flying career, although you've achieved so much already.
I'm kind of keeping my doors open as such with career-wise. I need to go to uni first, so I'm hoping to do aeronautics and astronautics. It's kind of been the course I've wanted to do since I was 9, so hopefully I'll be able to do that. But career-wise, aviation is kind of a pretty big thing. I'd love to be a test pilot, being obsessed with maths and physics. But then again, I'd also love to do airlines or go in the RAF or do aerobatic flying, as well as I love stunts in movies and stuff. So I'd love to be a stunt woman, but I'd also love to do presenting. So I'm just kind of like flying along and hoping that I'm going to pick the right field to landing at some point.
So Ellie, I've got a comment here that says, any scary moments flying? And this is going to bring me nicely on to my next question, which was your engine failure just after takeoff. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, most people go their whole career and all the engines work. So for you to have an engine failure is quite unique. So set the scene for us. Tell us what the day was, what aircraft you were in, and what happened.
So I was flying the Super Decathlon, just getting used to the variable pitch and everything. And it was Bodmin Airfield on their flying day, right when all the aircraft were departing, which is really helpful. And I'd just taken off and realised that the rate of climb was appalling. It wasn't building speed, and I couldn't really have any back pressure on because I was just trying to maintain that speed. So I decided to turn downwind early, and it was about 500 feet downwind when it failed.
Wow.
Wow.
And did you have any sort of, apart from the signs that you said, could you feel the engine was rough running, or were there any other signs?
It didn't sound rough running at all. Apparently there was a small puff of smoke out of the back of the aircraft on takeoff, which we couldn't see. But other than that, there was no sign of an engine failing at all.
And interesting, you turned downwind early, which is, there's a bit of decision making going on there. Was that a little bit of glider pilot in you? A little bit cable brake?
Maybe, I'm not sure. I kind of just thought I'd rather be back and be able to land somewhere near the airfield than having to make a decision on Bodmin Moor with a dual carriageway and stuff. And I kind of figured if I act early, there's less things that could go wrong.
Yeah.
So you turned downwind. And then talk me through your sort of decision-making process. You thought, I'm going to try and get it back onto the air, land on the airfield. I'm going to get it onto the runway, or I don't know what the orientation of the runways are there.
So I didn't get it on the runway. I just decided that was not possible. I'm not going to. It was actually weird. I had 20 seconds from when it failed to when I stopped. So there wasn't much time at all. I could have turned into wind, but the field to the side of the airfield was really, really bumpy, and it was technically a valley. There's no way I would have been able to land safely. So I turned towards the airfield with a slight tailwind, luckily with the cub flying, I kind of know how to nail a speed and land with slight tailwind. So I landed in the long grass. There wasn't a scratch on the aircraft. So that was good.
There we go. So, I mean,
Wow.
I'll just kind of unpick all that. There's some very good decision making to put yourself in a position to firstly figure out there's a problem. Secondly, to then take some action, put the airplane in a place where you've got some options, and then to fly the airplane. Just fly the airplane all the way in. And this is my drummer. There we go. That's Adam. He'll text me in a minute saying, "I'm not your drummer. I'm a proper airline pilot." Some very cool flying and decision making. And so Adam is, much as I hate to give him credit for it, a very experienced glider pilot and a very experienced airline pilot, and he agrees. Some very good decision making. And I think it's very easy to forget that all those remarkable sort of feats of aviation and all that management of sort of risk is built on all of your experience to date and your personality as well, in order to make those decisions quickly and consciously. Exactly. Look, there we go. Lane's,
cheers.
Wow.
Reflective practice is something we do in the airlines a lot, Ellie. So we always look back and think, how could we have done that better or differently? Or the outcome was amazing, but did I do the right things? Did you look back on this and think, could I have done anything differently that would have improved it? Or were you glad you made the decisions you did? Were they the only options you had? You talked about one of them, the turning into wind versus downwind. But did you look back on it and think, actually, formally do sort of some reflective practice? Or did you just think, I'm lucky to be alive and walk away from it? And that was it?
I kind of debrief on every flight. It's something that I've also been taught with the cub flying. So I did definitely think about it, and I kind of thought, what were my options at different points? I could have continued climbing and then ended up somewhere over the moors, somewhere trying to land. I could have tried and extended down and got back to the runway, but there were aircraft parked near it, and I didn't really want to cause anybody else any damage either. So I think, given that the outcome was there was no damage whatsoever and everybody was safe, it was a pretty good decision.
I agree.
Wow, that's so impressive.
Yeah, you can see us all sitting here nodding, and 3 airline pilots here all nodding in unison. Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't think I could have done. I'm not an experienced light aircraft flyer, and I don't think I could have made the same decisions. And I probably got it on the ground, but not as nicely as it sounds. And that's just me being honest, because I don't have good experience in light airplanes.
Scotty, your descent rate might have been slightly higher as well.
Possibly, yeah, and I've no idea why that might be.
Lunch.
Yes. I haven't had lunch today. I haven't had lunch yet because it isn't lunchtime here yet. Ellie, I'd like to just say, look, when you take off, I do this as a pilot, and I'm sure Mark and Lindsay do as well. Every time just before we take off, we say, "What if?" And actually sometimes we verbalize that with our friend who we're flying with. We'll say, if this happens, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. Do you consciously do that in your head every time you get airborne now? Do you think you do it more now than you would because it's actually happened to you? It's actually a real thing for you now. Well,
I always did it. It was something that, again, I taught farm strip flying. Quite often, if you get out, you can't land back at that strip at all. So it's always having an extra field, but probably more so to an extent. I'm also the kind of person that I talk out loud to myself. So if something goes wrong here, I'm going there. This is what I'm going to do. So I do definitely have a what if plan.
Some people would say talking out loud to yourself's madness, but I completely do it as well. It's exactly the same. It might be madness, but it works for us. Thanks, Ellie.
Yeah, the good thing about that in a cub is no one can hear you because it's so loud already. Yeah, that's brilliant. So, I mean, I'm going to talk a little bit about your studies and STEM, and I know you've got a passion for that. Lindsay's picked me to talk about this because I'm as dumb as a rock. So, and I was not very confident in my own abilities. But we've talked a little bit about managing your time. Is there any special time management technique, or are you just naturally kind of okay at that?
There's not really any technique at all. I just take book to the airfield, revise when I get home, do some interviews because it's what I love to do. Really, it's if you want to do something, you'll find time to do it, no matter how difficult or how much it takes.
Yeah, it's that balancing the time. So I loved aeroplanes and I didn't love school so much, and I found it was difficult to motivate myself to do the thing I didn't like quite so much. And so I guess for other young people who want to get into flying, I mean, you're obviously very able and gifted with that. Do they have to be as able and gifted as you?
I think it helps to be able to understand what's going on, and if something goes wrong, how the aircraft handles. It's surprising that when there's no prop wash, how different everything feels. But I don't think it's essential for most forms of flying. Not at all. Only if you really wanted to get into like test flying or something. I don't think it's really, really important.
So if a fairly regular person like me tries hard enough, that's enough in your view, do you think?
I think so. If you can pass the exams and you can fly safely, then there's no reason that you shouldn't be able to fly.
There's a nice little tweet just popped up here. There we go. As a new engineer in the industry, we need more girls in the industry like Ellie. There we go.
So just touching on that, Ellie, when I was flying, I used to walk into the crew room and it was typically all men, all a little bit older, even than Mark and Scott, would you believe? And generally a little bit musty.
Musty?
Yeah. Like just, need to say. And do you think there's, it's important for more sort of, young women to get into aviation, and how difficult is it, do you think, to change those perceptions? There was a story that we talked about just before we came on live about when there was yourself and another young girl, and you were going flying together. So maybe give us a little insight into that.
So it is still mostly older men, but it is getting a lot better, and even in my time, more girls are coming through, which is really, really great. There are some amazing reactions that you get. I was flying that young girl with a combined age of 32 or something. There were these men stood by the aircraft when we were taxiing in, and they were kind of looking with this face of absolute shock. And then this one girl got out, and I took another girl, and their face kind of got even more shocked. And then we taxied off, and I don't even know, that must have finished them off, because by that point they were just so shocked. It was amazing. But there are some amazing things being a girl. I remember flying into an airfield and not being allowed back to my aircraft because apparently it was only for pilots getting ready to depart. And at the same airfield, there's this one person that has told me a few times, because I was flying with a male passenger, and he thought that this male passenger was my dad. We kind of kept telling him, no, he's not my dad. But by now I think I have 10 dads, and I had to go back to my dad, who wasn't my dad, to get him to help me to get back to my aircraft so I could take off, which was fun. There was some amazing.
Oh my!
I know how you feel, Ellie, because if I go flying with Scott, people think that Scott's my dad.
Yeah, whatever. You're only saying that because there's 5,000 miles between us. I know that.
Yeah. That's awesome. And you were saying earlier that excuse me, lockdown has kind of affected you in a slightly unusual way, which is you still need a ride to the airport. Is that right?
I do, yes. So I still haven't got my driving license, which means that my dad has to drive me to the airfield. Thank you, Dad. Yeah, lockdown has been a kind of bit of a bummer in every single way possible. But yeah, oh well.
Well, Ellie, listen, it has been such a pleasure having you on our show tonight. Thank you so much for your time. I think it's given people inspiration. I think it's given people a really good insight. And I've just loved having, all your little stories and quirks along the way. So, thanks for taking the time this evening.
Not at all.
Ellie,
Thank
you very much.
Bye, Ellie. Bye.
And we look forward to sort of seeing all your Twitter stories as your kind of career progresses over the next few years.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. Speak to you soon, Ellie.
Brilliant. Look at that.
Goodness.
Confident young lady.
Wow.
Absolutely gobsmacked. I'm gobsmacked at a couple of things, actually. Gobsmacked at the stories where she couldn't get back to her aeroplane and she had to pick a dad to escort her back to her aeroplane. That just shows you it just shows you how bad our general aviation is in terms of stereotypes and stuff. That's just really, really something we need to get past. But I've got underwear older than the combined age of those two that were in the airplane earlier. It's just bonkers.
Just need
really
the brain bleach to stop thinking of you in your underwear. Thanks, Scott. But absolutely.
Sorry. So move on. Move on.
And I love that Ellie mentioned John Beattie, because he's an awesome character. He's the only person I know that's ever crashed 2 Sea Furies, and he's just an absolute aviation enthusiast in every single way. He started his life as a 15-year-old stoker on Ark Royal, I think, the original Ark Royal, and he went through Royal Navy Historics and so on. He's an absolutely incredible guy, an incredible bloke.
Scott, tell us, who have we got next week?
Oh, it's going to be exciting. An old favourite of the show. We've got Jay Hunter coming back next week, but he's bringing with him Ian Black. They've just collaborated on a book that many people may know about called Tornado, which is a big photo book about the tornado during the Gulf War, and actually the story of the tornado and its development, actually. But we're also going to be talking about Ian's flying of Lightnings, famously flew Lightnings and a number of other amazing aircraft like the F-1 Mirage. But we're also going to be talking to Jamie about his amazing photos that we've seen before, and the Aviation Barbecue, which is something which I think is really cool. You know, Mark and I watch that far too often on YouTube. It's a really cool show if you haven't seen it. And don't forget to subscribe to that and our show as well, of course. Subscribe, please. Subscribe. There's a thing here somewhere.
Oh, yeah. I'm so maxed out with this button pressing.
Sorry about my coughing.
Right, well, on
Sorry
that
about
note,
Scotty's internet, but it's been really good having you all with us. So thanks for being along for the ride this evening.
See you next week.
Good night, everyone. Good night.